When the boys first exploded onto the scene, I was immediately taken by it.
Boys okay?
Now, I'm not much of a superhero buff, but I do like a good superhero story. I grew up in the era of The Dark Knight and Watchmen, so I had the opportunity as a casual observer to witness the seismic shift that occurred in comics back in the 90s. I was conscious of the fact that comic books had started to explore darker themes with established characters, and that there was this spirit of independent comic book publishing that was building momentum. New stories and characters were being created outside of the big brands like Marvel and DC. I remember experiencing some of the more darker story arcs by borrowing collections from my local library. Now that's old school. The most memorable of the grittier story arcs for me was Batman Nightfall. Eventually, I started to collect comics in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I discovered artists like Joe Madureira, Humberto Ramos, Chris Bachalo or Chris Bachello, and J. Scott Campbell. At that time, the spirit of independent comic book publishing, from my novice standpoint, seemed to be at an all-time high, and I couldn't keep up with all the one-shots and new series that were being released. One title that I started to see on the shelves a bit was The Boys. To be honest, it looked a little bit too grounded for me, and the premise just seemed like another title trying to be another Watchmen. Also, I wasn't a fan of the artwork. From the artist I mentioned before, going from such highly stylized artwork to that of The Boys was a stark difference. The bottom line is, sometimes when you're in the moment, you view things differently, and I didn't give The Boys a chance. Cut to 2019 and I'm blown away by its adaptation for the small screen. By then I was fully aware of the insertion of the ideas of the woke cult in everything. But this show seemed to be a little different. It was irreverent, clever, funny, inventive, and brutal in its depiction of gore and violence. I've seen a lot of gore and violence on both the big and small screens, but I honestly saw new levels of both in this show. There were some woke things that I could see alongside the Holly weirdness, like the jab at Christians and how women are just victims of men, white men to be more precise. However, there was some good storytelling. The cast were doing a great job bringing the characters to life, and they actually took jabs at various groups across the board, so I was willing to overlook the woke insertions. There was also my bias of Eric Kripke being the showrunner, as I really like the show Supernatural. Yes, I know, that's an oxymoron coming from me, but I'm a sucker for creative storytelling and character banter, which Supernatural has an abundance of.
So you get to just stroll out of the pit, huh? What makes you so special?
I like to think it's because of my perky nipples.
I say we call Bobby, we get him back from hedonism.
What's he gonna tell us that we don't already know?
I don't know, but we gotta think of something.
Why am I here?
For tea parties!
Is that all there is?
You people used to have old-time religion. Now you have Us Weekly.
I don't know, I'm more of a Penthouse Forum man myself. I think I've been had.
Oh, you ain't been had until you've been had by the chief.
Kneel before time! Kneel before time!
In spite of the strength of the show, The Boys that is, there was one undeniable truth that I couldn't ignore. This show was being aired through Amazon, and Amazon had made it clear that they were fully on board with the woke agenda. So I pretty much knew that at some point the show would end up pushing those ideas more aggressively, and the bait and switch would happen. It's usually at around season 3. By the time season 2 came around, my understanding of the woke and the techniques used to manipulate the audience had gotten even better, and that's when I started to see the give and take. For every moment spent mocking the woke, the final outcome would be to promote it. Take the blind superhero Blind Spot, for example.
It's Blind Spot, right?
A differently abled member of the Seven. We're gonna pull through the roof with millennials. Inclusion's a big priority for them right now.
They mocked the idea of forced inclusion, adding a differently abled superhero to the Seven. However, they solidified just how terrible Homelander was by using that scene.
What happens if, I don't know, I do this?
Not just as a character, but what he represents.
And now you're just another useless fucking blind guy.
Or take the girls get it done line.
Can you tell us a little about how girls get it done?
Girls get it done.
Girls get it done.
Stormfront mocks the interviewer when they bring up female representation.
Do girls make better heroes?
Do girls make better heroes than boys?
Look, I get you have your talking points, but why does it matter whether heroes have a dick or a vag? Shouldn't we all just, be competent at our jobs?
But by the end of the series, Kimiko, Starlight, and Maeve are the ones who do the most damage to take down Stormfront. And it was at that moment that Frenchie affirms,
Girls do get it done.
the cleverness of this line is operating on so many levels, it's impressive. The most clever thing about the integration of the woke into this show is that it's not shoehorned in. It's relevant to the story and ties in well. Not to mention that the woke cult utilizes genuine grievances and concerns in society to manipulate people into getting on board with their agenda. So, season 2 made me start asking the question, what leverage does Eric Kripke have? How is he able to mock the woke narrative? There are many examples of the agenda being pushed, but there is none more obvious than Homelander. Now, let's establish what the woke narrative is. I'll keep it surface level so that this video doesn't get too long and drawn out. Social justice is the view that the world is split into two groups, the oppressed and the oppressors. The goal of social justice is to bring about radical revolution that will transform or destroy the system that allows those classed as the oppressors to maintain their influence over society. Why? To bring about a society that will become inherently equitable. No one will be left behind. If that sounds familiar to you, yes, that's exactly what it is. Now, intersectionality plays an important part in the woke paradigm being promoted in the show, so we'll define that too. Intersectionality, simply put, is the multiple layers of oppression that minorities suffer. In the woke, minority means race, gender identity, social class, sexual orientation, and many others. Just log that in your memory banks for now. In season 2, we get Stormfront, who's actually an interesting character in the beginning. She was hitting the nail on the head, pointing out the goofiness of woke ideas, even taking a jab at the hyper emphasis on female representation. So think about that. You see the BS, she sees the BS. You may see the BS and can't say anything about it because you could lose your job. But here she is, seeing the BS and calling it out. But then here comes the bait and switch. Turns out she is literally nasty. What does that mean for you? Well, you made the same observations as her. You were harboring the same thoughts as her. Nasty. So, what does that make you? She also had a handle on social media and knew how to generate memes in order to manipulate her base, which was an army she was trying to build. So she was a social media savvy public figure with the nasty brand associated with her. And she's trying to raise an army? Gee, I can't quite put my finger on who she could have been a symbolic allusion to. Gosh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, this is when I started to see things for what they really were. And this is when I started to see Homelander for what he truly represented. So let's get into the meat of this. Let's go back to social justice, the idea that the world is split into two categories, oppressed and oppressor, and that it's a systemic problem in every facet of society. It's nothing else. It's not about the bad choices that people make that puts them in a bad situation. It's not the fact that people can be lazy good-for-nothings. Somewhere, somehow, there's an oppressor. Now, the supervillain at the head of this oppressive system, the cultural hegemony, if you will, is none other than, drumroll please, the white male. Now, this whole idea of hegemony is very clever because it can apply to any country, anytime, anywhere. And so in this case, a rebranding occurs. They like to do this, by the way. Their terms have double meanings and they love to shift the goalpost. So cultural hegemony now becomes white hegemony, and that ties back into intersectionality, the layers of oppression minorities suffer. Let's get a little clearer on that. A black woman falls into the category of the oppressed simply because she's a female in a male-dominated world. But her experience as a female isn't the only oppression that she has, is, and will experience. Her race adds another layer of oppression to her experience in the world. So if an individual is a black female lesbian who's differently abled, that woman would attain the status of a quasi-religious figure, because those intersections put her at the lower end of the white hegemony. So the white hegemony owes this individual because of its innate oppressive nature, which is rooted in its original sin, racial injustice. So now the entire society needs to stop what they're doing and make every effort, from financial to political, to make sure that this woman is on the same playing field as everyone else. If you do not participate, you're the bad guy. So it's a race to the bottom to be the most important in society. By the way, even though it's a white hegemony, the white woman is still classified as a minority. I am not joking. So the blame lies solely on the shoulders of the white male as oppressor, because even the white woman is a victim of him. They'll deny all this, of course, but they make this very clear in their own literature. Now let's take the white male and show why he's the supervillain of this ish. If you're a white, straight, able-bodied male, yes, being able-bodied puts you in the oppressor category. If you're financially well off, Christian, yes, being a Christian puts you in the oppressor category. If you are any of those things, and there are plenty more, you are the absolute worst. Now, let's look at Homelander. He's white, male, he's able-bodied as he's straight, money isn't even a concern for him. He's affiliated with Christianity, he's blonde-haired and blue-eyed, even though his hair is dyed blonde, it's the visual cue that counts. And the most significant visual cue that brings it home as to what he represents is the fact that he literally wears the American flag as his cape. I mean, talk about caping for America.
It was at this moment he knew. He fucked up.
That's some gentle comedy, dude.
Now I want you to think about every despicable thing he's ever done and put it in that context. What does he represent according to social justice? And the fact that he does all of it while wearing the American flag as his cape. Think back to Blind Spot. Also, remember that scene when he went to that African village? In the context of white hegemony, that scene takes on a whole new meaning from a visual standpoint.
Terrific.
Oh. Also, think about his team up with Stormfront. The nasty teams up with the white, straight, able-bodied, financially well-off Christian male who wears the American flag as his cape. Think that's trying to tell you something about America? By season 3, they were pushing the female empowerment narrative a bit more, and it wasn't even subtle.
Cut her some slack. You shouldn't be afraid of a powerful woman.
They also took a jab at American firearm owners with the character Gunpowder, suggesting that American firearm owners are all just ignorant hicks, which was kind of lazy, to be honest.
If Dakota Bob Singer gets elected president, you say hello to left-wing socialism.
They even mention him.
Because I'll tell you this right now, he's gonna follow the George Soros globalist playbook to a T.
Another clever and subtle move here, associating the mention of that individual with ignorance, prejudice, and ironically, cult mentality. After all, there are no responsible firearm owners in all of America. There are also a couple of gender-swapped characters from male to female, which included Stormfront. It's interesting that the gender and race swaps that we see now only seem to go in one direction. There's also the technique being applied of brutalizing the audience by exposing them to gratuitous sex.
Don't be a pussy, laser my fucking tits.
Violence and or gore.
Ma'am, your nose.
You have 5 minutes to make your opening statement.
which is not exclusive to this show by any means.
Ah, time for breakfast.
Now, I'm no prude, and to be honest, I get that there's a morbid fascination to see what outlandish thing is going to happen next on screen. The truth is, audiences have always been manipulated. That's how we got here. It's just been a slow, incremental march to this point. It didn't just happen overnight. The more degeneracy the audience is exposed to and they accept, the more depraved they'll become as a collective. And what could possibly be the fate of a society that sinks to the lowest depths of its own depravity? There's a lot more I could get into here, but I think I'll leave it there. I hope you gained some value from this video, and if you did, please like, subscribe, and share. Stay tuned for more videos, and I'll see you next time. Peace.